All right. Welcome everyone to the ADHD Parent Support Group. We are pleased to have everybody show up and we're really excited about this one. Just want to do some housekeeping real quick. If y'all are not already a part of our private smalls group, feel free to make sure to join us. I'll post the links and everything in the notes. And if you're not a part of our newsletter, we just introduced a newsletter this month for all our parents to join. And we just really want everybody to have access to the information that we have in a small group. There's a lot of stuff in there. If you're already in there, check out our guides. Most of my blogs and stuff like that I write for parents get posted into the blog section. And so we really want everybody to start going on this journey of understanding how our kids work because as many people know in the industry, parent training is one of the first lines of defense. Whether it's ADHD, autism, or other types of neurodivergence, the more that you as parents know about how to support your children, the better off they're going to be because you have to be the voice for your children until they learn to advocate for themselves. And that means that you need as much information as you can get. And a lot of times, some of the information that's out there is really confusing. Sometimes it's completely wrong. And we want to make sure that our group is providing fact-based, science-informed information. And we want you to have a place to go to when you need to vent, when you need to stress out, and just feel accepted and loved and cared about. So today I am joined by Caroline Maguire, who is an award-winning author, coach, and keynote speaker who helps people struggling with social skills and friendship. She holds a master's in education from Lesley University with specializations in social emotional learning and executive functioning. Her book, Why Will No One Play With Me, won multiple awards, including American Book Fest Best Book Award, and was named one of the best ADHD books of all time by Book Authority. She speaks internationally at conferences and corporations, and her upcoming book, Friendship Skills for Neurodivergent Adults, comes out in April 2026. Thank you so much for being here, Carolyn. I really appreciate it.
I'm so happy to be here. So, hello, everyone. I think this is the perfect time of year to have this presentation because we are back to school. It is also a very hard time for parents. So, I'm glad this is recorded so that you can watch it. And I am excited to be here. And I can't tell you enough that I can't agree more with what Shane said. Having that education for yourself is really the first line of defense. And one of the reasons I wrote Why Will No One Play With Me was that 21 years ago when I started coaching, I've been around longer than most, I really realized that parents had no guidebook. There was nothing that wasn't filled with jargon and written for academics to help you help your kid. So I'm going to give you some information today on how to help your child make friends. This is a longer journey. I have a couple of free handouts for you that we're going to put in the chat. I would tell you that my website is an absolute palooza of information on this topic. And I have a YouTube channel. If you follow me at author Caroline M, you can find everything that you need. And I have this stuff throughout because I do a lot of free information. So let me share my screen and we'll get started with this so that we can talk about helping your kids make friends. So this journey for me started when I was first coaching 21 years ago. I started with more academic coaching. How do you get started? How do you write in a planner? All of this stuff that ADHD kids need. And I noticed very quickly that our population had a problem with needing to make friends and not having friends. This resonated with me because as a kid with ADHD, I didn't know I had ADHD then, but I didn't have many friends. I really struggled socially. I was bullied a lot. I definitely didn't really know how to find my people. I was in a very, very small school and I only had 2 girls in my class, both of whom were my bullies. So I spent most of my time hanging around with boys and I really, really wanted friends. And so when I started working with kids, it really resonated to me that they wanted friends. I was like, yeah, all this academic stuff we as parents want, but they wanted friends. And one day I was working with a little boy on reading logs. Well, if you know anything about ADHD kids, you know we will read your book, but we will never write it down in a reading log. And we were working on this, and I asked him some question that probably wasn't the best question. And I was like, if you could do anything, what would you do? And he said, you know what I want to know, Caroline? I want to know, why will no one play with me? And the question really stuck with me. I, at that time, was doing social skills groups through the Hallowell Center with kids. I had already had the idea for a guide that became Why Will No One Play With Me. And later, when I was in my master's program and I told one of the professors my ideas for titles, she said, your title should be Why Will No One Play With Me? Because it's the question that kids ask. And it's a painful question. And if you've heard it, I am totally empathetic with the fact that this is super hard. And I think that there's a big piece here where ADHD kids struggle to find their people and to have the skills we need, like making conversation, like how to find what group you can play with, like moving from parallel play. Immaturity affects our humor, right? So maybe our humor is a few years behind other kids. There's a lot of reasons that are brain-based reasons. So my first free thing for you all that Shane has to put in the chat is, this is a guide to how to help your child with executive function weakness. Shane's going to pop this in the chat. We can send this out afterward. My email is right here. This is the one that my administrative assistant monitors. And so she nags me and says, you have 50,000 emails, answer them. And I always do, always myself. So I'm happy to answer your questions. When I want to think about socializing for kids with ADHD, we really have moved away from the model that many of us grew up with, which is fit in, do anything you can, cut off pieces of yourself, just be a chameleon, imitate people, and that will be your way of being friends. And we've really moved away from that. And it's totally possible for them to make friends, even with ADHD traits. And what we're really looking for now is belonging, because we know that kids who don't use their authentic self, first, it rings less true. And secondly, they end up having mental health effects from what's called masking. Now, let me make a distinction here. Being your authentic self does not, to me, mean pushing people on the playground or always talking when and never listening, right? What it means to me is that my quirks, my ADHD traits like stimming, my values, my sense of humor, that stays the same. That I'm finding friends that are my people instead of just accepting anyone. So I'm coming from the perspective of we make friends differently. I think that a lot of times the reason that my book is popular for ADHD and ADHD kids is that a lot of the strategies that are for typical people don't really work for us because we do have self-regulation issues and other challenges. So we're not asking kids to stop stimming, to stop having a lot of energy. What we're trying to do is give them the skills so that they can actually connect and to help them read the room and understand the impact of their behavior, understand the situation so that they can be more adaptive to the situation. And someone said this to me, and it's just brilliant. To connect, you have to have skills, right? And that's a big piece. Some people intuitively come to these skills, and some people don't. One of the first steps is parent intervention. So I'm sorry, it's so hard because everything always comes back to us as parents. I'm a parent too. I understand. I did this long before I was a parent, but as a parent, I can tell you I have complete sympathy because I know everything starts with us and it's a lot. You are reinforcement. You are a model for social skills. And we have some need to also strengthen the teacher home connection so that you are working more with the schools and you're hearing from the school what's going on so that you can help. And when you write, I hope you write a letter the first week of school telling the school about your child and their needs. to the teacher, and included in that letter, I would include social concerns you have. I would tell them also what you're doing, what you're working on, how you're helping. Schools really respond well to that because they feel like, oh, you're doing something too, not just them doing something. Many of the ADHD kids that I work with don't get services or supports at school. So I always come at everything from the perspective of if we don't get any support, we can still teach these skills and we can still bridge. And I would say you becoming their social skills coach, we have to start by putting the oxygen mask on first and coming from curiosity. So if your kid says, I don't want friends, instead of jumping in and we're going to talk about how to communicate and shift your communication, I come from curiosity. Coaches are curious. And I'm like, what's that? What do you mean by that? A kid told me the other day they were too weird to make friends, which was painful and broke my heart. But my first instinct was to be like, what's weird? Like, what does weird mean? Right? What does weird mean to you? What do you mean by that? And I'm going to teach you today how to use certain communication techniques to get your child to open up, because I'm not delusional. I know plenty of kids, and believe me, plenty of kids who work with me and are my clients feel this exact same way, where they're like, I don't want to talk about this. This is the elephant in the room. This is super hard for me. I don't like this. So for kids who are as young as 5, we can use 2 techniques to help them open up that I find super useful. And my joke about these techniques is they also work with bosses and in-laws, and I'm going to show you how. One is open questions. So coaching is the process of teaching and guiding and showing rather than telling. And as a parent, and believe me, I mess up and do this too, we tend to tell. And we tend to also be very reactive because we're so worried. So we tend to say things like, no one's ever going to want to be your roommate because you're so sloppy. I'm so worried that if you don't learn how to make friends now, when you're older, you won't have anyone, right? And we lose it and we say these things. And so my first big piece of advice is, as much as possible, right? Instead of telling or projecting the future where you're worried about these things, become a more collaborative partner for your child, someone they can confide in, and someone they know that when they tell you stuff, you're not going to use it against them. So I have a client example from this week. I have a client, she's college age, she's very shy, she really struggles, and we've been working all summer getting ready to go back to school. And she did fabulous things in the past week. Like, I was so happy. And one of the fabulous things she did was to get a text chain going of a bunch of people she met and to reply to that text chain. And that is not something a lot of my clients really struggle with, stuff like this. And I said, have you told your parents about all these great successes? Because she had others too. And she said, no, because if I do, they jump on me, or they start giving so much advice, or they say, what about? And that was a more grown-up person articulating what kids tell me every day. So one of the things we're going to learn is to hold back, to have small conversations. Some kids do better if you talk in the car. Some kids do better if you talk while you do a craft. And I have all of this more in depth in Why Will No One Play With Me? But I'm not saying that you won't mess up sometimes, because we all do. And when you do, you get up tomorrow morning and you try to do different. But rather than telling, let's become more of a collaborative partner so we can get kids to open up. And my method is to be less direct and to find out, and we're going to talk about this, what your child wants from friendship, because this is their journey. And we're going to use open questions. So open questions is this idea of using what, who, why, rather than telling. And so one of the greatest open questions of all time, how come? Right? I didn't go to the after school help. How come? And instead of, you need to mix into the group, right? You need to get in there. You need to play. You need to show up to people. We would say, what happens if you don't join in? What is hard about joining in? What games do kids play, right? And so you're asking these questions. If a child has autism and they can't answer open questions, we can ask these in a close-ended way. And a lot of times I'll be like, is it X or is it Y? And I also use a lot of visuals, and you'll be provided with those visuals today. And there's tons of visuals on my website so we can point to things. And sometimes younger children need that too. The other technique that I love, love, love is reflective listening. And this is super easy. This is an easy one to master. And all it is, you repeat back your child's statement without opinion. You're just reiterating it. And you can either say their exact words, or if you can't remember, just give the sort of gist of what they say. And this really makes them feel heard, which is a huge piece. Do I feel heard? Do I feel seen? You're also confirming what they're saying. You don't go to the lunchroom because you feel like you'd have no one to sit with, right? I'm confirming. Is that it? And many, many times parents tell me they know exactly what's going on socially. And then when I have a conversation with the kid, it is not at all what the parents think. So there's a real benefit to sort of getting the story and getting the lay of the land, and to sort of confirm that you are hearing them right. A lot of what I see going on with parents and kids, and again, there's no judgment here, it's so easy to happen, is that there's sort of a miscommunication. You have a vision of what you think they're saying, and they have a different vision. So this repeating back reflective listening also allows you to clarify, right? Like, am I getting this? And they feel very validated. There's something really nice about hearing your words, right? And then you can express empathy. I hear you. I get it. Just by reflecting their words, you are saying that. If you use their words, there's something very validating about that. And there's something about asking a kid a question and allowing them to speak their perspective, even if what they say, by the way, sometimes kids say stuff to me that is not true or kind of cockamamie. But what happens when you say something, right? When you use your own words instead of me telling you, is that you kind of float above your body and you hear yourself. So one of the things I've found over the years is many times when I say these things or I reflect to them, kids will say to me, no, that's not what I meant at all. And I'm like, I'm just repeating your words, right? And they'll say, no, 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 you're misunderstanding. This is what I mean. Sometimes I think part of that isn't that I really misunderstood. I think it's that when they hear the words out loud, they're like, oh, I don't really want that statement, right? Like, have you ever been there where you're at a party or something and you say something and you're like, oh, when I say that out loud, it does not sound good. And part of this is to open up communication, because what I'm really proposing is that you become more of your child's partner. Now, this can take time, and we're going to talk about that. This can take a while before they would open up to you. But the more you're using this technique, and I would argue using it for academics as well, you're going to get their perspective. You're going to hear, you're holding up a mirror to their behavior, which is super effective because it allows them to witness what's going on. And rather than telling them, you're showing them, right? So part of this journey and part of the lessons in Why Will No One Play With Me is to help kids understand the social world better. You know, if I go nowhere and I see no one, a lot of times ADHD kids will act as if they've been rejected, or they'll say to me, I've been rejected. And then when I deconstruct the story with them, they haven't talked to anyone, they haven't gone anywhere, they haven't joined anything. So you're not rejected, you're just not visible to people and you're not in their thoughts. So, but to say to them, this is a problem of you don't join anything, it doesn't necessarily get them to want to join. So the most effective way is to help them look at what goes on, right? What do you need to do to make friends? One of the things I have developed is, since Why Will No One Play With Me, is really a formula to make friends. And this is some of the adult examples, but there are kid examples too. And part of this is we need to join high interest activities so we see people and we see them again, right? And we're with people and we're engaged with people. But at the beginning, you're just really helping kids learn to talk about friendship with you. And we're paving the way toward building those skills. So I'm going to share a video with you here. I'm going to have you watch it, and then I'm going to sort of explain some of the things going on. This video is of a tween and I talking. And what I wanted to show, I had someone come in and help me with this video, was that I'm making lunch boxes and we're sitting here and I'm asking her questions and I'm not interrogating her. I'm just trying to understand what goes on for her. And I think what you're going to hear is I get a lot of information, and information is power. Because the more information I have, and by the way, this is the neatest my kitchen's like ever been for filming. The more information I have, the more I can try to figure out what's going on for them socially and try to influence them and help them with the skill building. So I'm going to share this video. So you told me that sometimes people make friendly gestures toward you and that you don't always respond.
No, my anxiety gets the best of me.
What does that feel like?
Like everything I start getting down on myself, and I just feel like, oh, I'm awkward. I'm scared. I'm not doing anything right.
So it's the fact that you're worried that you might look scared and awkward that's an issue? Okay. What makes you worry that you might look scared and awkward?
I don't smile.
Okay.
I don't look happy.
Okay. What's the fear about looking scared and awkward? Like what?
Because if I look scared and awkward, no one will want to talk to me.
What makes you say that?
Because people who are scared and awkward, I mean, they're not fun and exciting, so people don't usually want to talk to them or play with them. I feel like I'm boring. People in my grade, they're just, like, some people will just crowd around them, and they're just so fun, and they tell these great stories that make everyone laugh. And I don't have stories like that. I don't say things.
So I hear you saying is that you think being outgoing and being a good storyteller is what makes you a good friend?
I mean, no, but sort of. Because people who I know, they are like that, and they have tons of friends.
Okay. So the people who have tons of friends, they tell great stories and they're outgoing.
And they're exciting.
And they're exciting. Well, what makes you feel you're not exciting?
I just get so tense, and I just have this look all over me that says to other people, I'm bored, I'm scared, I'm awkward, and it makes them go away. It doesn't make them want to come talk to me.
I hear you thinking that you feeling awkward makes people go away. How come?
Well, not just me being awkward, but also that I will meet someone, I become friends with them when I do actually make that step of I am talking, or I find someone who does get interested in me, or they do find my stories funny.
Okay, so it sounds like once you know someone, you really have an easy time in friendship and you don't lose them as a friend and you keep on with them and they enjoy your company.
I mean, not all the time.
Okay, but getting to that point at small talk, it sounds like it's really, really hard.
Yeah, it really is.
Sweet. So I'm going to go to the next slide so that we don't keep playing the video. So this is, an interesting thing, because some of you are probably thinking, I have information about these situations, and you might. But the big piece of this conversation is that I got a ton of information. And part of what goes into helping kids make friends, in my experience, is skills, but it's also mindset. And this little girl has told us that her belief is that you have to be funny, extroverted, fun, and exciting to have friends, which is not true. Research doesn't back that. It's just not true. But that's her belief, right? just as some kids' belief might be, it's not going to happen for me. It's just something that isn't going to happen. I'm not going to have friends. Some kids believe that they have to be the clown. Whatever it is, we got a lot of information using the reflection and the open questions. And she is super anxious about things. She's struggling with making conversation, which is such a classic ADHD trait, which is to struggle making conversation and small talk so that you can connect and people can get to know you. And in Why Will No One Play With Me, I have many lessons on how to teach kids to make small talk. And I do lots of videos about this because I think it's really, really, it's a critical skill. So the questions allow you to connect better. And then they also allow you to get information that's key. And all of this helps you pave the way toward actually doing the skill building lessons that I have in Why Will No One Play With Me. I call this paving. And so I have a couple of pieces of advice on this front. One piece of advice is that if you get help, your child is more likely to accept help and accept that we're all working on something. So I would also start peppering in to daily conversation all the things you yourself are working on and all the things without parentifying or being inappropriate and all the things where you get help. If you are a person who never calls Apple Care or never gets help with your computer or never calls a plumber, I would start doing that because kids see those models and they tend to follow those models. And many times kids say to me, my parents say this, but they don't do it themselves. And I would suggest too that we foster this environment of, when I need a plumber, I call a plumber. When I need help with friendship, I work with someone, I read a book, I do something. And that is if for kids who are resistant to this idea, don't want to talk about it and are very shut down, this paving process can go on for a year. And I have a lot in Why Will No One Play With Me about how to get kids who are secluding themselves, who are heading to the basement after school every day, how to get them to come and participate more. And it might be that they need therapy. It might be that there's some depression and some other things going on. But I think it's really important to understand that we're not just going to jump into the process of coaching them and building skills. We're going to pave the way so that we can then have a conversation about building these skills and what do they want out of friendship. Part of this is modeling. So in the way we learn social skills starts with modeling. So if you want a child to play cooperatively, we have to show them how to play cooperatively, and we have to show them models, and then we have to allow them to rehearse the behavior, practice the behavior, experience the behavior, and then self-correct, right? So think about anything you've learned in life, riding a bike, when your kid was learning to walk, they always had models and then they would practice and rehearse the behavior and then they would tweak it, right? They would self-correct. So part of this whole journey is helping kids to be more open about talking about friendship. And then also all the lessons that I have provide them with those models and with the opportunity to rehearse and reenact and practice. And this could take a long time. I think you're going to see wins along the way, and those wins can be small. A willingness to join a text chain, like I gave in the example, that is an enormous win, right? A willingness to have a 10-minute conversation with you about this when they've never been willing to talk about it at all, that is an enormous win. I mean, have yourself a slice of cake that night and and whatever you want because you have earned it. The other piece of this is to talk about friendship. So one way that I get kids to be less afraid of this topic is I just start talking about friendship in general and what they want. And we talk about there are different levels of friendship. One of the things I have found about ADHD kids over the years and adults, frankly, is that they misjudge the level of friendship that they have. I have a tool in the book called Flavors of Friendship. And the idea here is that if I think someone is a friend and they're really an activity buddy or a person I say hello to or an acquaintance, what ends up happening is I am asking stuff of them that one would ask of a friend, and I'm imbuing them with those characteristics. I'm sharing with them at this level of them being a friend when they're not really a friend. And one of the reasons we as ADHD people overshare, in my humble opinion, is self-regulation and all those things. But it's also that we often misjudge the level of relationship of the person standing in front of us. We overshare with someone who is an activity bunny. We only see them at soccer. We only see them at dance. And maybe we are friends in that setting, but would they name us as a friend? Many times when I'm talking to kids and I say, I want to help you make friends, they'll say, I have friends. And there's a piece after the flavors of friendship in the book where you lay out all the people they know and we put them into these different categories. And I do it in a way that is not going to make them upset. But the idea here is that they need to start realizing the different characteristics of a friend. And as parents, I think this is a great gateway lesson, because if we start talking about friendship and what friendship means and who is a friend in your life and who is an acquaintance, and I'm not going to share as much with them because they're a yoga buddy, they're not a real friend. Kids start to reshape their mindset and their thinking about friends. And I have a lot out there about how to move from an acquaintance to a friend, right? Because that's a scary thing. And a lot of times kids get stuck in that acquaintance stage. But the biggest thing is if they understand friendship and how it works and what friendship is, that is an essential piece that is often missing. And I find a really great way to get them to talk about stuff is to ask them about their social landscape, ask them what they want in a friendship, who's a good friend, who isn't a good friend, right? What have they experienced? We're in back to school time. So I tend to ask questions that will get them talking. What did you eat today? What did the lunchroom serve? And then they tell me all the gross stuff and everything that's going on. Who sat with who? What happened to that kid? And he wasn't so nice. Where is he? Like, give me a social landscape. Like, who's friends with who? I ask it in a more indirect way than saying, did you have anyone to play with? Did you sit with anyone? Do you have any friends? Because that freezes them up. And it's also embarrassing. It's really embarrassing to have to admit that you don't have any friends and that you don't have anyone to sit with. I'm not saying you don't need that information and we don't want to guard against that and help kids with that. But I think to get them to open up and talk about friendship, talk about it in general so that they are less afraid of talking about it. How do you make friends? Making friends is a process, but there are some sort of tried and true methods. And I've come up with a formula for friendship, right? And so as we're teaching kids skills using the lessons from Why Will No One Play With Me, and we're having conversations, maybe we're still having conversations and we're paving the way toward becoming your kid's social skills coach, this is the formula to have in mind. And it's participation. And I know that some kids will not join stuff and will not participate. That's why we need the communication method to be able to talk to our kids about tough stuff and to talk about friendship. But the way to make friends is participation. When you are participating with people and you have shared experiences and you connect with people regularly, you bond and it builds trust. Then eventually you meet outside the activity, right? And that builds a friendship. There's something about being in the trenches with someone, having that shared experience and shared interests. So I'll just give you a grown-up example. Think about the workplace. How many times have you had an ogre of a boss and you have this shared experience and then that allows you to bond and to get to know each other? Or you work together in a volunteer capacity, right? And you go in and make wreaths for the church every Christmas and you talk to someone and you get to know them and you bond. So the more we can encourage ADHD kids to use the thing that they are best at, which is interest. Interest is our fuel with ADHD. Interest allows us to pay attention and it allows us to not be bored and to want to do things. So I advise kids to join high interest, high interactive activities where they have the chance to make friends. I like them to join something where there's like add-on activities. We make posters on Friday night before the big game. We go for pizza after every baseball practice. All those kind of things allow them to make friends and have more exposure and the opportunity to make conversation. We may need to build conversation skills. We may need to help them over their anxiety. Along the way, lots of things are going to come up, and I equip you for that in Why Will No One Play With Me. But I think there's a really important starting point, which is what are they interested in? And what would they like to do and join, and where are their opportunities to make friends? And that's why we need the conversation and the ability to coach and communicate with kids. Because if they won't talk about it, if they're like, no, 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 then we can't get them to engage in this process or the skill building process. Now, I want to say this. I also have a lower bar. They can go and talk to no one for a while if they're super scared or super shy. And then slowly I move them to the point where I'm like, make conversation. Ask 2 questions during the day in class. Go to the activity and say hello and chat with someone for 5 minutes. When kids are super anxious, I lower the bar and I have them take little micro steps because otherwise it's too daunting to them. In many cases, they will tell us, I won't join anything, I won't do anything. And I'm so familiar with that. And if you're thinking that as a parent right now, I totally feel your pain. I do think there's benefit in paving the way for this. And I do think there's benefit in sort of saying, in this family, we move our body and we do something to do that, and we join at least one other activity. But for the really resistant crowd, you're going to have to work up to that. And I know that. And that's why I have a lot about this in Why Will No One Play With Me. And I have a lot on my website about this, which is here at the bottom of the screen, CarolineMaguireAuthor.com. Proximity, if you think about your life, proximity helps build friendship. Because proximity, if you show up every Thursday at the same place, it actually helps with that shared experience. People come to count on you. And one of the things that happens with us as with ADHD is we have trouble keeping up with people. We have trouble reaching out to people. We don't respond to the text. We don't respond to the group chat, and we don't always show up. And so that's one of the things to work on with your child, because if they don't show up regularly, there's something about proximity that really helps you build friendships. And that's really part of my formula. So the more you have those shared experience and the more that people are used to you showing up, the more you can build a friendship with them. And so friendship is bonding, right? It's that zing you have with someone. It's that moment when you look across the room and you say like, oh, you too. And the more we use these high interest activities, the more they're going to find people with shared interests. It also helps because in certain communities, I'm thinking of theater, fandoms, places where there's other neurodivergent kids, they're going to find other kids who do info dump, who do STEM, who do fidget a lot. It's a much more accepting world out there than it used to be. And I think that there's a difference between stuff we do that's sort of ADHD traits and stuff we do that alienates people. And I wouldn't harp too much on the stuff we do that's just ADHD traits. And I would really find a way to help them think about like how they want to be. And there's a lot of lessons in Why Will No One Play With Me that allow them to think about friendship, how it works, what people expect, so that you don't have to say it directly. You do the lesson and they learn things like, people want you to share, right? And so you're not saying you don't ever share. You're using questions and you're using the lessons to help build those skills. There's something called the circle of participation. I helped Jessica McCabe with her book, How to ADHD, and there was a chapter on how to people. And I wrote that chapter with her. And one of the things we really came up with was you have to enter participation with people, be in that circle of participation, get to know someone and nurture relationships. And part of what isn't happening for a lot of our ADHD kids is they're not doing that. They're not participating and they're not gaining insight into people, getting to know them. And that's where making conversation, although I know that a lot of them hate it or aren't great at it, it's really important because conversation isn't meant to just talk about the weather. Conversation is meant to help you get to know other people and what they're about and what they like and dislike so that you can nurture a relationship. And if I were you, if you have a kid who doesn't really like to talk, I would sort of reframe it in that way. So, high interest activities that help you build bonding. So, here's a few that are more kiddish than what's here on the screen. I love yearbook. I love anything with add on activities. Even karate can have a sparring team where you go and you help other people or you spar and you actually travel on a bus together and get to know each other. Any volunteer stuff where you go and you do stuff together is really a great way to make friends. One of the ways that I also help kids learn to make friends is to have a role. If you're on yearbook, you have an excuse to talk to other kids and to get to know them. And therefore, you're partnered up with people and you're going to have a role or an excuse to make things easier. So if you think about in the adult world, if you're at a barbecue and you feel super awkward, run the barbecue, right? Be the person who helps in the kitchen. That way you have an excuse and something to do. In the kid world, I would argue that whenever you have a job, if you are the stage manager, you talk to everyone and you get to know everyone. If you are this person who's helping with a sports team, even if you're not playing on the field, you're helping people, you're getting to know all of them. And I also am a big fan of talking to teachers, talking to coaches, talking to other folks, and asking for their insight in what's going on friendship wise, and then also asking for their help. Is there a way they can help get your child involved so that they are more interactive with kids and perhaps specific kids who might be their people or more who they're looking for? One of the things I love to teach kids to do is to have 3 conversation starters. And even little kids, we do this. What episode of a show are they watching? What sports team? What did you do this summer? So that they feel more secure in making conversation. And then I love to rehearse conversation. Have dinner as a family and practice making conversation. Practice in the car. Allow them to know that if a conversation falls apart, they can still recover. It's not the end of the world. Many times, right, in the adult world, our conversation becomes stilted and then we're like, I don't know where I'm going with this. Part of what we want to do is build their confidence. I would have your child doing something that is their strengths every day so that they can point to their wins and that they can have an arena where they feel really good. It might also be simultaneous, that high interest activity, right? But for me personally, it was theater. If I hadn't had theater, I really would not have any self-esteem. But because I had theater, I had a place where I was more accepted, I was doing well, and I really could feel good about myself and I could point to that. I may be dyslexic, I may struggle reading, but in the theater, I excel. So I think that's a piece of this as well, is to give them a place where they feel really good. And then as we're wrapping up, I have a conversation technique that's more for older kids and for adults, but I want to share it with you, which is to drop a ping. Part of conversation is feeling people out. And so a ping, I just think of it like a submarine. You're dropping something. I love the Avengers. What do you think? Right? I really enjoy drama. For the adult world, you might be like, I am a foodie. I love to go here. And then to see what people say. I have a client I'm working with now where they were like, I love hiking and outdoors. And when they dropped that ping and sort of made that statement, what ended up happening was they said it to several people. And on the 4th or 5th person, the person was like, I love nature too. Now I am finding my people and conversation feels like it has an actual purpose. So I would teach kids also, like, what can they do to drop a ping? What can they do to make conversation and sort of feel people out, and ask kids what they like to do? Now conversation therefore has a little more of a purpose. And I'm going to jet through a couple of these ping slides because they're not as apropos. one of the things I like to do is help kids learn to make conversation and to tell a tight story, because a lot of times kids are meandering. Their part of their social struggle is that they can't tell a story very well. So what I do is I have them tell a story really loosely with meandering everywhere. And then I ask them to tell me the story again, thinking about who am I telling the story to? What's like my level of friendship with the person? What about the story do I want them to get? And why am I telling the story? And then we work on being more tight in our stories and being more to the point. And you can do this also by having family dinners and asking kids to ask questions and make conversation and tell a story and say, like, hey, keep the story tight. And that will also work on that skill in a very casual way. My next book is Friendship Skills for Neurodivergent Adults. It comes out in April, and I'm sure I'll be back, and we'll be back to tell Shane about it. There is a college element. I have tips for college students in every chapter. The book I've been mentioning is Why Will No One Play With Me? That can help you with all the lessons and the skill building and really goes more in depth to how do you get kids to talk about tough stuff. I have a free handout of how to practice self-regulation skills and being a good winner and a good loser, because a lot of times kids really struggle with being a good winner and a good loser. And my Instagram at author Caroline M and my YouTube channel has tons of free videos demonstrating role-playing these skills. And I'm going to end there and stop sharing my screen and answer questions.
All right. That was awesome. So for me, I think we talked about this when we came to the men's ADHD support group and things like that. When I got our first computer when I was 12 and I had access to the internet for the first time, I was watching Oprah, and there was this FBI body, lie detector guy, and he was like, the human person has all of these tells and things like that. And I was like, oh, hey, here's a quantified theory of body language that I can learn. And that's how I learned, like, how to read social cues, because my autistic side was just like, what's going on? Why are people laughing at jokes around me? And I love this because I'm sitting here actually having a lot of things affirmed for me, by the way. Thank you very much for that.
You're
The things that-
That's what I want to do, Shane.
My wife and I are our twins are in first grade, and it's like new school, new everything this year. And they're just like, and like, whenever they get home, like as we're walking up from the bus stop, so what did you have for lunch today? Oh, and my son's like, we had pizza. I was like, oh man, was it good? And he's like, it was the best pizza ever. And I'm like, I have questions because my pizza wasn't that good. And of course, then we have this conversation about it. And then of course it turns into like, we want more pizza. I'm like, okay, of course you do. That's what's going to happen. But my daughter, she's super bubbly, but she's also shy. And we are actually seeing her starting to open up and allow herself to be more out there with other people. My son, he's a lot more reserved, but he's also a lot quieter until people start talking about things like Minecraft and things like that. And of course, then he just goes nuts. And my wife, the special education teacher, she gets to go to their school. Then she said she wound up seeing him on the playground, and it was him and like 5 other kids, and all they were doing was speaking in Minecraftese. And like, he was like, oh, so he found his tribe. That's awesome. And she goes, yeah, there's a code there somewhere. And I'm like, yeah, I understand. And she's like, our children don't play Minecraft. I'm like, yes, I understand that, but they do watch it on YouTube or religiously.
I was just going to say they don't have to play Minecraft. They can watch it on YouTube, or they pick it up, or they just stand there, right? Like, or they're like, I'm going to talk about this topic with other kids and I'm going to maybe not be as informed, but they don't have to play Minecraft to know all the stuff or many other things. Like they pick it up.
And I think that was always my anxiety. I have that nature that if I don't know enough about the thing, then I don't feel confident in speaking on the thing.
Yes.
And a lot of the skills that I learned that you actually talked about was just kind of like being around people who do understand that thing, who love to talk about it. and like then like just kind of like by osmosis like learning from them and being open to that and being comfortable in that. I'm uncomfortable because I don't know enough about this thing,
Yeah.
but it is interesting. Genetics is a good example for that one. Like I actually like got to sit in a room full of geneticists and have them all talk about the different things, and I'm like, wait, I actually do know about epigenetics because I was studying it because I got this hyperfixation on this thing. And then they were like, oh yeah. And then we just like wind up having this huge long conversation and like, this is how social things work.
Yes.
Okay. But that was adulthood lesson learned, not a childhood lesson learned. So thank you so much for this. The first question that we have is the one that I talked about earlier. If y'all have questions, please drop them in the chat. If not, that's totally fine. I've got a bunch of them that have been submitted so far. The first question is, how do I get my child to use his voice more? He's very shy and quiet and will resort to using his hands. He may push a kid or poke them because he's afraid to ask them to play. However, his actions have them really not wanting to play with him.
Okay. All right. So I'm dying to answer this question. So I want to say first, one of my questions always is there a speech delay issue or an actual speech production issue? And if you think that there is, I would definitely get him checked out and get him with a speech pathologist. And speech pathologists, by the way, so everyone knows, speech and language pathologists do tremendous work with social skills. The other thing, though, is I think it becomes important with certain kids to use your words and to not respond to them unless they use words. So I do this in a very hammy, funny way because I use humor a lot. So you go over to the fridge and you don't know what they want to drink or to eat. And I just stand there and I'm like, you have to use words in order for me to do this. I need to know what you think. So start by doing things like that in the home and have a conversation also about if you don't say things, people don't know what you mean. There's also lessons in While Known Play With Me about sort of like people can't always know what you think and what you mean, and you have to share and tell them, and about more collaborative play. I would say also if their go-to is using their hands and poking people, I would ask them like what is their anxiety, what makes them anxious, what makes it hard for them to use words. You may already have done that and know. And I would have a conversation about how do you think people feel if you poke them, right? How do they feel if you don't use words? And I'm not doing this in a way that shames and blames. I'm doing this like come from curiosity. What do they think? And then I would start orchestrating some play dates with cousins, close friends, even older kids or younger kids, where the goal is to get him to use his words and to initiate whatever he wants to play using words. And I would tell him this goal, right? I would say, we're going to have a play date with so-and-so. And here's the thing. I want you to use your words. And then when he does, I would make a huge deal out of it. Every time they use their words rather than just poking or telling or pointing, right? A lot of kids will point. I would do that. I still have concerns that like, is there a speech delay? Is there a receptive language delay in pulling up those words? And if you sort of see that, I would definitely make sure that they get some testing and get some help. But I think one of the big things is kids don't know how to collaboratively play. We have to show them. So if you can, you facilitate and have some of those play dates. You do some of those lessons on collaboration in While Known Play With Me. And then we start really getting the child to understand they have to use their words in like all forms of life. And really start talking about how do people feel when you poke them, right? And he might say, I know it's not the right thing to do, but I don't know what else. And in that case, use a replacement behavior. What can he do besides poking, right? What can he do instead? A lot of times ADHD kids, and I mean all kids, need something else to do, right? I use potty humor long after everybody else has sort of abandoned it, and because I'm kind of immature. And you'll talk to them and they'll be like, that's kind of my go-to. What else, right? They only talk about one topic of conversation, right? Shane told his Minecraft story. I love it. But what if they only talk about Minecraft, right? Well, there's a whole thing about info dumping and oversharing and monologuing, but there's also where many kids will say, like, that's the only thing I know to talk about. I don't know how to talk about something else. Let's practice. Let's pick other topics. Let's give them an alternative so that they don't go to their go-to. They have other things that they can talk about. Some of this is sort of like giving them alternatives and talking about it and problem solving. I hope that helps.
Yeah, we actually just had in the chat. Sometimes when some children approach my son at playground and say hi, kids he knows from the school, he just ignores them and doesn't even look at them.
Yep. So there's a couple things that could be happening. If some kids, especially autistic kids, don't always know that like people expect you to respond, right? And then some kids are just oblivious, right? So I would do a lot of role play around when someone comes up to you, do they expect you to respond? I use humor and you choose what you're going to use because it has to work for you and your kid. But I do a lot of role play with clients where I pretend not to respond and then they get really frustrated and they're like, Caroline, I just said this to you. And I'm like, oh, is that a problem? Like, I didn't know I have to respond. And they're like, yeah, you have to respond. So I do a lot of sort of mocking and doing things like that so that they sort of get the point. But there's also lessons in Mile Known Play With Me about like sort of what do people expect when you approach them? And I would start talking about it and asking them, get curious, why do they not respond? And like practice. I would start practicing responding to people. What can they say? And really be like, today when we're at the park, this is the thing that we're going to do. We're going to respond to people and really be their partner. And again, there's so much more in Mile Known Play With Me about how to do that.
Yeah, I kind of want to add to that. Whenever we're dealing with autism or inattentive ADHD, a lot of times children's brains are often in their own world and
Yes.
they may not hear like what Carolyn was saying with they're oblivious to the world. Like that's a thing where they may need to say, hey, if you want my attention, you may have to tap me on the shoulder. If your child's old enough to start doing advocacy for themselves,
Yes.
or you may need to let the parent know, hey, if my child's kind of like off in la la land, they're not ignoring your child. Your child may just need to tap them gently on the shoulder or something like that. That's what we do to kind of get their attention when they're in their own world. And this kind of helps give them the accommodation that they may need until they start to get to that place where they can acknowledge when people are doing that.
Yep. Absolutely.
We got another question. I want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. My child is bossy and talks over people a lot, and it drives people away from him. And the teachers complain about him constantly interrupting class with talking to his friends. There's multiple questions in this one. How do I get him to not be bossy and to talk when it's more appropriate?
So there's a couple things here. There's sort of the interrupting and interrupting in class. There's also the talking over people and understanding like when it's our turn to talk. And then there's sort of the like bossy element. There's a couple things. This could be somewhat a self-regulation thing. And this can also be I don't think about other people. And I don't think about how my messages will be received. And I don't think about when is my time to talk, when is my time to listen. So a lot of kids who really struggle with that kind of perspective taking, it can be some kids on the spectrum struggle with this stuff, but it can also be like, I'm not tuned in enough. I'm not tuned in enough to what's going on around me. So I would do some lessons on interrupting and blurting, and some of them are in Mile Known Play With Me. A lot of this stuff is on my YouTube channel and on my website because it wasn't the focus of Mile Known Play With Me. The other thing I would talk about is working on the self-regulation. That is 100% in Mile Known Play With Me, the lessons around self-regulation. And then I would do a lot of perspective taking. What are the expectations? When do you talk? When do you listen? Oh, thank you so much, Shane. You're like so great with the links. What is it that people expect? What are the rules of the classroom? There's lessons in Why Will No One Play With Me, and don't ask why I know this, but I just taught them in my training program this morning. It trains coaches. It's on page 121 on unspoken rules. So every place we enter has unspoken rules. What are the unspoken rules of the classroom? This is a great thing to do with all kids this time of year. What are the expectations? ADHD kids do not read the classroom expectations. And sometimes even if the teacher does a lesson on it, they don't hear it and tune in. So I ask them, what are the expectations? Sometimes we have to be what I call a social spy, where we go and we observe and we watch and we gather information, and then we come back and really to think about what are the expectations. And one of the expectations is that we let the teacher talk and we don't interrupt. It could really be rooted in self-regulation and that they just blurt and think of things. But I'm hearing a little bit of that element of, I don't think about the fact that I'm going to blurt, I just say it, and I don't have that perspective taking. So I would do those lessons and I would use those unspoken rules and start talking about it, and then working on blurting and interrupting and self-regulation. And we don't have to do it from a shame and blame thing. We can say, one of the things that's an ADHD trait we all end up working on is that we sometimes speak before we think. Sometimes we have trouble with this. We are a race car and our brakes don't always work, right? We'll use we'll channel our Ned Hallowell today, because he would kill me if I didn't say this in a very neuroaffirming way. And so because of that, let's work on this, right? And I really, again, go back to everyone is working on something. And if you have multiple kids in the household, I cannot stress enough. Nobody, even a kid who gets straight A's, everybody can be working on something. Maybe they need to be more kind. So everybody in the house can be working on something, us as well as adults. And this is what we do. We work on stuff, right? And we improve ourselves, and we sometimes do tough stuff. The more we say that, and the more that becomes the culture of the house, the better. So that when we need to do stuff when we get older, we're accustomed to getting help and seeking things out. And there's nothing wrong with it. It eliminates that, like, oh, I'm the only kid seeing a therapist. Not true. Lots of people are. One of the things I do too, by the way, is I took pictures when I went to my publisher, Hachette, last time. And there's like hundreds of books, like floor to ceiling in this big New York building, of self-help books. And I show them to kids and I'm like, you think you're the only person working on something, but look at these thousands of books. And it's the second biggest publisher in America, but it's one publisher. Everybody is working on something, right? All these people buy these books. They don't print them for their health. They have to sell. And they sell because people are trying to be on a personal growth journey. So that's just another little tip if you're trying to get your kid to like engage.
Yeah, this is ironically enough something I struggle with. And my daughter struggles with this one. For me, whenever I get into those places where I'm super excited about the subject and things like that,
Yep.
my wife would get annoyed with me, and she would just get annoyed. And so she and I have sat down for years and years to communicate together on stuff like that. And I'm like, look, if I'm doing that and you notice that I'm like running away with the conversation or getting hyper fixated on a subject and other people are ready to move on, or if I do interrupt anybody or overtalk them, just lovingly pat me on the leg and and give me a quick rub underneath the table. Let that be our cue that this is what's happening, and I'll wrap up what I'm saying, or I'll make sure I apologize if I recognize, because when ADHD, I didn't hear that person say anything, or I didn't realize they were saying, or I was so far in the subject, I didn't want to lose the train of thought. By her just tapping me on the leg, I know, okay, I did something, quick recollection, apologize.
Well, and I have a way for that too that's in my own Play With Me Shane. I love that, which is code words. So kids don't want to be embarrassed. And so you come up with a code word between you.
I wanted to tell you, I learned this one from your book. Our kids have red, yellow, green whenever they're being too rambunctious on the playground. I learned it from you, where I call out, like, hey, you're hitting into a little bit of the red. And we've talked about this at home. When they're calm and they're quiet, red means you're either pushing or being loud, or you're being interruptive or something like that. Let's pull it back into the green means let's pull it back. And it's our secret code. So it's a game that we play. I thank you, by the way. I wanted to tell you, thank you for that.
No problem. The zones is someone called Leah Kuypers, which is the zones of regulation. I'm going to give her full props because it's brilliant. But the code word thing, and then just having something you say is mine. And I think couples, we do this, like think about it. But I also think there's a degree to not shame. So I say this in the book, I wouldn't reprimand kids on a play date in front of other people. If the play date, in order for your kid to be self-regulated and navigate, is 15 minutes, 30 minutes, that's okay. And I would host as many play dates as you can stomach until such time as your kid learns the skills in order to go to someone's house and to behave in a way that's going to get them invited back. I know that it's so much. Trust me, like for a person who writes about play dates, I am not a huge fan. It's a lot. But when you are hosting, you can control the environment. And in a lot of cases, when we're working on this stuff, the example I gave in the book is when you bring over the snacks, just go clown, if that's your code word, and that will signify to them, like, I'm getting to be too bossy or I'm getting to be more. Oh, there is a lesson in the book if your child is having bossy behavior. I'm sorry, I should have said this before, called Pile of Choices. And it is about how many choices we make for other people. And I literally have them, what I do with my clients is I take blocks and I write out all the choices they've made on the play date, and the blocks are like this high. And then the choices that their friend was allowed to make. And then the blocks are like this high. There's a visual in the book. You don't have to do it like that. But what I love about the visual is that I'm like, that's a lot of choices. How many choices did your friend get to make? How do they feel about that? So I don't come from, look at this, you are bossing everyone around. I come from, I'm noticing this, right? Because this is something that's partly self-regulation, right? Like I just go and I do and I do and I do. And it also can be a streak of not taking perspective and not allowing people's choices. And some kids are more controlling. And I have kids who I work with who literally tell the other kid on the play date, you're having a very berry juice box and I'm having raspberry or whatever. And the other kids don't like it. They don't want to be told what they're doing. So this is a way, again, instead of telling them, we're helping to hold the mirror up and witness for them. How do people feel when you tell them what kind of juice box they're going to drink, right? And also, if you're struggling with this, there are other lessons in the book, but that's just off the top of my head, like my absolute favorite one, because when they look at the pile, they're like,
All right, it's time. I want to say thank you so much for this. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. Thank you so much to everybody out there. All the notes and everything like that will be in the show notes whenever I post them on the YouTube. Her links and all that stuff will be posted out there. We really appreciate everybody who was able to make it. We appreciate all the questions that got submitted. Thank you so much. And I just want to say, if you're not already in the private group, please check it out. We'd love to have you there. We do these, and we're going to try to do these every month. And we're going to try to have experts come in and have these kind of conversations. And we really want to provide value to you in this realm as parents, not just for your children's neurodivergence, but if you yourself also deal with neurodivergence, we want to provide that resource and be that community that helps you grow in all the different ways that you are as an adult. Thank y'all so much.
thank you, Shane.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.